Hey everyone, good morning. Delighted to be here in the LA Public Library. My name is Susan Benton, and I'm here with some wonderful colleagues and experts to talk about needs assessments. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a woman who believes in signs, in messages from the universe. And yesterday evening I got in late. I was working on my email, catching up on some voicemail, and finally I was just really exhausted and got ready for bed. But just as I was going towards that bed, I noticed on the wall a beautiful photograph, a black and white photograph of this building from many, many years ago. And it really grounded me that there would be in a national, frankly, an international hotel chain, a photograph of LA's public library. Now, to be sure, this is a building of incredible architectural significance, but I think it also says something about the pride and the realization of the significance of what happens in this building, that there should be a beautiful black and white photograph of the LA Public Library in my hotel room last night. It was great. And whether you're working directly in a public library or you're working in conjunction with the public library, and you may or may not have a building like this in your community that has the same architectural significance, what you're doing has incredible importance to the individuals that you're working with every day, and to the community that you serve, and to the leaders that you serve. I come to my work not as a librarian, but many years working with city and county top appointed officials, top elected officials, mayors, county executives, who really are working on some of the most important critical issues for our nation: education, employment, workforce development, health, financial security, quality of life. And every one of those mayors, every one of those county officials are being served so well by the work that's done in the public library. But how do we know where we're putting our resources and where we're able to get the biggest bang for our buck? Across all the professions that I've worked with in the local government sector over the last 30 years, I think this profession is acutely aware of what the needs are in their community. Yet with all of that just kind of instinctual knowledge that we have, you all are incredible in terms of having marvelous observation skills and being able to kind of connect the dots about what's happening in your communities and discern what's needed. There still needs to be an ability to focus and make sure you're matching your resources where the greatest needs are, where the highest priorities are. And so that's the genesis of this session. And as I said, I've got great colleagues with me to talk with you and with me about the needs assessment processes that they're using to not only look outside the library and what the needs are, but what are the needs inside the library? What are the staff training? What are the staff development that we need to do to make sure that we're always able to meet our public where they need us to be? So I'm delighted to introduce you to Kristin McDonough from the Science, Industry, and Business Library, Danielle Milam from Las Vegas Clark County Library District, and Jacquie Brinkley from Infopeople. And we're just going to go down the line, and I'm going to ask each one of them to describe their programs, and then we're going to open it up for questions. Kristin.
Okay. I'm going to talk about our financial education program, where we decided to train the staff. The needs assessment that we did was that we run a very vibrant program of over 350 classes, hands-on classes, and presentations, and financial advisory at the Midtown Science and Business Library, and we wanted to push it out to our 90 branch libraries. And so we sent a survey to the managers and the staff there, and were absolutely astounded at the response, which showed resistance, reluctance, that we later realized was outright fear. The staff felt totally unequipped to host financial programs. We might find this also in the legal area and in the health and medical area because of a fear they would be asked questions that would lead them to give advice. So with the help of IMLS, we engaged in a 2-year intensive staff training program. And the results of it, 11 modules of interactive exercises, scripts, videos with avatars representing typical kinds of questions one gets in a library, games, and most important, web-based resources on topics like banking, credit, savings, living on the financial edge, insurance, tax, identity theft. So we have 2 years' worth of that curriculum, and it's on the website to be freely shared, customized, used across the country. We update the links continuously, and it's under MYPL Money Matters. At the end of the 2 years, we had trained over 235 frontline staff. But the proof is in the pudding. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how we continuously assess to see if that core of staff who were trained then, what difference has it made in the neighborhood libraries? One of the things we've done, and another needs assessment, is that we partner actively with trade associations as well as with government agencies who embed their volunteers, their pro bono volunteers, and their staff at the library. And as we trained our colleagues, we waited to see what kinds of programs were they going to ask for. At that same time, the Office of Financial Empowerment in New York City issued a study of immigrant communities that was done in concert with community-based organizations, banks, and consulates. And it's not surprising, the results, that there are cultural, linguistic, et cetera, barriers that keep people in immigrant communities from being banked. So with that needs assessment from the City of New York, we put out a call to our 90 branches that 2 years before hesitated to have even the most basic presentation. And we had 15 libraries who volunteered, and again, the proof is in the pudding, to give up valuable real estate, community rooms where children's programs and knitting circles and after-school programs are all vying for this real estate, and staff time. And they volunteered not only to have the programs, but to have advisory services from volunteers who had been trained in a 45-hour program by the City University of New York. We were able to cite them in 11 branches. We just started maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and the staff is more disappointed than anyone that the community is very slowly responding. So we've gone from a staff who kind of said, keep everything in Midtown Manhattan, to being so invested because of this wonderful, intensive program that we did that made them comfortable and adept and capable of knowing what is the difference between giving informed referrals to authoritative resources and giving advice. So what I would like to share with you are 3 major insights that we have gotten. One, clearly, that a comfortable, knowledgeable staff who is invested enough to use those websites, him or herself, is absolutely key. Partnerships, absolutely key. So throughout this whole process, we have staff that go to local consulates. We have partnerships with everything from the Financial Planning Association to the Community Services Society. They are dying, as are federal agencies, state agencies, and city agencies, especially in the wake of 2008 and Sarbanes-Oxley. They are looking to every library represented in this room as a channel of distribution, not only for their trained staff, but for the volumes of very accessible, very friendly, very easy to understand educational material that they have been charged with producing since 2008. They have a remit, they being tri-li agencies and NGOs, to do better consumer education. And they are looking actively for outlets, not just in the immigrant community, but across all sectors of our public, because they know that we as libraries are places that they can touch their public. So one of the things that we are doing in the library world is in April and October, which are the financial literacy months and weeks, we make a big effort to have a Money Smart Investing at Your Library Week. Many libraries do partner with the Federal Reserve, et cetera. And then very often, those efforts dissipate somewhat. So what we're trying to do is, when we have branch libraries with the willingness to provide this real estate, is we are trying to provide this kind of group presentation, hands-on instruction, and personal, confidential advisory services offered by our partners. So I have a notice here, and I am going to close in my last few minutes by giving you some informal ways that we're assessing that we're doing well. Even though our branches are scattered across 3 boroughs and everyone's understaffed, as you are, we continue to offer this hands-on training as well as 10 e-learning modules, and libraries continue to send their staff to these. With the private one-on-one advisory services offered by trained volunteers from professional associations and through the Community Services Society, we ask the people who come to these sessions to comment, and to comment anonymously. And so what I would like to do, as we're talking about touching our immigrant communities, that this huge survey indicated feels culturally and educationally deracinated, if you will, from the banking system. I just would like to end reading their comments. I met Miss Wen. These are advisory services offered in Cantonese, Mandarin, and in Spanish at these branches. I went there to find the assistance for my aunt's debt. My aunt lives in the cooperation, and the building had borrowed lots of money from the bank, so each unit had incredible debt. Miss Wen is nice and willing to help me find free legal service information. She speaks very good Chinese. Therefore, for most new immigrants and elders, this is very good service. Especially, they don't ask people personal questions. This is the second one. This Tuesday, I joined Money Matters Coaching. She not only knew about credit, but also tax. She is a great Chinese people, the same as other Chinese person, like enthusiasm, patience, responsible. Many people can't speak good enough English. They only speak Chinese. Also, they don't know how to use computer. Also, Chatham Square Library had the program. I heard many persons said great overall. We need finance help in Chinese.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kristin. That's wonderful. So that's a nice example of doing a needs assessment and understanding that the staff of NYPL needed some new training and an orientation to build their comfort in working with community members around financial matters. Now we're going to go to Danielle, who's going to be talking about external to the library.
Thank you so much, Susan. Make sure I can. Oh, going to get me started. So I work with the Las Vegas Clark County Library District. There it is. And had the great pleasure of arriving in Vegas right at the downturn, which became the Great Recession. We were in a recession, top of the list for bankruptcies, unemployment, house foreclosures, and just incredible distress for about 70 months in a row, leading the nation in growth for 3 decades, and then for 3 years just tumbling like crazy. So it's a great pleasure for me to join this great convening by IMLS and to talk about engaging communities, because we used the opportunity of the recession when, as a development director, I wasn't going to go out there and get a whole lot of money, to find some good resources that came into us through the Nevada LSTA program as well as IMLS National Leadership Grants, to get some tools in place so that we could quickly assess our situation and learn more about our community. Let's see, where do I point this, I wonder? Pointing at myself, probably. So IMLS started, my career with IMLS started in early 2000, and the question on the table really was, what was the library of the 21st century? And we learned so much through the great grant program that the IMLS did in that era. And now we're moving on to what kind of community do we want to build? And this is really exciting work, I think, for the library field, because we're getting out of our walls and into the community in a much deeper way. The way we did it was to use some private sector tools as well as some government sources. So we used the Census, we used the Department of Labor information, and more importantly, we used some new databases that are available called market segmentation databases. This is a map, the first map that we created in Las Vegas, and it really told us a whole lot about our community. In these national databases that are used by the private sector daily, and they do pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to generate even 1 or 2 reports, we created a dynamic system where our every single staff person could get on the system in the library, or actually remotely because it's web-based, and take a look at the community. And we overlaid on top of all of the data from the Census, Department of Labor, and the market segments, our cardholder database. So we very quickly got a picture of our community. This little sort of crazy quilt map shows you that out of the 65 categories that are in this particular database called Tapestry, that is provided by Esri, we had actually 54. And when we started the program in 2010, we had 49. So because it's dynamic, we're able to really track the kinds of changes that the community is undergoing. It's fragmented, it's incredibly diverse, and the story in Vegas is that every year a third of the city moves in and a third of the city moves out. So we need this kind of dynamic tool. This shows you just one of the branches. We did code the cardholder activity at their most frequently used branch. So we were able to create a new kind of branch map that didn't have the old concentric circles, but rather actually has census block by census block where the cardholders are that use that particular library. And what we learned, as you can see, this is scoping into one of the branches in that great big map of the metro area, was that our branch managers are doing an incredible job of managing complexity. This one has 21 different household segments, and they literally change block to block. One of the things that we say in the library world is that we serve families, and one of the things that we learned in Vegas that we actually serve 26 different kinds of households of families. And that's just quite amazing. As our budget fell a third, I think I got there, it was $84 million, and now it's $48 million. We had to very quickly target our resources to the actual populations that we're serving. And so we started looking at those family segments, and nearly half of 67% of the population actually is households that have families. And as we started to dig deeper into the data, we found out that the largest segment, almost 300,000, were these families called up and coming. I love the names. They're like nail polish names. They're really crazy. But up and coming says what it means, and that's these families are young, they've got young kids, but they've got education and they've got careers and they're on their way. They've got houses, cars, lots of expenses that relate to children and raising kids. But then the other half, almost 300,000 of the other family households are actually making less than $50K a year. And the aspiring young families, which is the bright pink, are going to be up and coming. The rest are making way under 50, like around the 30K to 14,000. And these are the families we're most interested in right now. We're one of the states that doesn't even have full-day kindergarten. Our legislature is meeting now. We're hoping to get that out of this particular session. And we're really wondering, where are these families who have young parents and young kids going to get the pre-K help that they need? And so this is very quickly, using this data, we're targeting right in on the very heart of our community's biggest issue, and that is education. Of course, it also relates to employment and economic development as well. Once we have this data, we're able to take our staff quickly through what does it mean. And we have a number of different exercises that sort of are precursors to maybe the more intensive work you might do in a very expensive focus group. And we just take we look at the segment and the description that's provided by the market segment folks. It gives you a lot of information, where they shop, what they do, what they like to do, what their interests are, how they like to get communicated with. And then we read between the lines, and we have an exercise, what makes them tick. This particular one, the Young and Restless, is a group that is actually singles, young singles. And like the name says, they kind of love the party in life. They probably work on the strip. And what makes them tick is just having some fun, and some fun that doesn't cost a whole lot. It also leads us down the path to get more familiar with the kinds of users that we use. So we go quickly from the market segment household type, which is by lifestyle and life stage, and we get into the user narratives. And this particular slide comes from another IMLS grant we had called the Learning Labs. We were very fortunate to be part of the ULC and Aztec project that was sponsored by both IMLS and MacArthur. And this talks about a young man who actually really was severely bullied at school, not doing well at school, like many of the kids that we're seeing in the digital learning labs across the nation, not doing good at school, but thriving in the library environment, where they actually, one of our branch managers started up a DJ lab. And as you can imagine, in Las Vegas, that's a very clear career path. We have one club that actually is contracting with DJs for over $6 million a year. Unbelievable. So this guy, we actually talked with his dad, and his dad said, "What did you do to my son?" He used to pace around the house. He was really agitated. He couldn't focus at school. And as the branch manager, Sal Avila, was talking to the young man, young man's father, he came out of the lab and said, "So, Sal, there's some kids in here that don't know what's going on. What do I do?" And Sal's like, "Well, go train them." So mere weeks and months later, he's actually on stage at our First Friday, on his way with immense confidence and fist pumps galore. This information has quickly given us the ability to move into strategy development, very, very specific to the households that we're serving. That group that has the resources, we know how to reach them electronically. Of course, all of these, being young parents with young kids, are digital natives. And so we're really looking at apps and mobile strategies, but we're also looking at the Great Divide. So that second half of the families that have low education, and I'm talking less than high school, low employment prospects, low English language. About half of them have low English language, and we know now, block by block, where do we go if we really want to reach the English learner population, if we really want to reach the families that need us the most. This is a chart that we actually created a pie chart for each of our library branches. And so, again, we're able to use the data. We had, as I said, 54 different segments, but we sort of divvied them into three major groups, and we color-coded them. We had three major kinds of families: families that have the resources, families that have low resources, and then families that have low resources and English language learning challenges. So the three oranges are kind of the family segments. Then we had the elder segment, and they were both elders that have the resources. We have a lot of Midwesterners and so forth that move in, and they have second homes and got lots of education. But we also have a huge population of seniors that don't have any resources at all, and so we wanted to sort of distinguish our strategy development for them. And then the second group is kind of mushy, but it's singles and couples that don't have kids in the household. And again, there we saw sort of a bifurcation of households that have the resources and those that don't. And so we were able to take the 54 segments and sort of bump it down to 7 segments where we could make some very specific strategies and set some benchmarks for getting people in the segment involved in the library, as well as trying to find like-kind segments that weren't using the library yet, so finding those neighborhoods where we didn't see a whole lot of cardholders. I might say also that using the little pie charts is helping us cluster our library branches, and they may not have been next to each other geographically, but now we're clustering them by who is it that they serve, so it becomes very customer-driven by the staff, and they feel very empowered to sort of tweak and tailor their branch service mix based on the actual population that they're serving. This is another map that we generated early on in the project, and there we actually modeled all the demographic information in town on a national study of adult learners. And we came up with a high challenge adult literacy map. And this is the first time that our community had actually seen data like this. We knew we had a tremendous number of adults that had low educations and marginal occupations and were probably in those years in the category of totally out of work, probably close to losing their homes, et cetera. And so this map actually helped us. This is the hot spot. All of these are high challenge adult literacy census blocks, and you can see some of them are really super high challenged. And those are the ones that we found actually were in the category called New West, which means that they moved to the U.S. in the last 10 years, so they're the foreign nationals. We used this to reposition the library in town. Before the recession, nobody in Vegas worked together. It was a very low collaboration city. And we were able to take this to the United Way, to our Economic Development Authority, to our school board, and to the executive staff of the school district and say, we are now targeting our adult education classes, our ELL classes, and so forth in these areas because we know that's what it really needs. And in fact, now we are moving one of our libraries closer into the area that is the super hot spot because those are actually also families that have low English and low income and low occupational opportunity. The latest grant that we received from the IMLS is called the Power Patron Survey. All the data that we're using really is based on checkouts. That's the only data our particular system has at this moment. We want to get more data in terms of, what's the behavior in downloads, what's the behavior in computer use, what's the behavior in program attendance. But this particular study is really looking at power patrons, and the vendor that we've been using, Civic Tech, has 10 other national libraries that we're doing this study with. And so we're able to see the long tail of use. A lot of our cardholders are in that 1 to 40 checkouts a year. This is 2014 data. And then there's a very long tail of folks that are using up to 400 items a year. So we took a look at that 20% of the long tail and then mapped them out to the market segments. And so this is telling us, are the power patrons mirroring the kinds of households that we're seeing across the rest of the community. And it becomes, for us, a way not only to do a community needs assessment, but to benchmark our future progress as we try to get more of the households into the library using it. This particular study will come out in September, so we'll have a few highlights that come out at ALA, and then we'll go ahead and put the publication out in September. So take a look at that when it comes out. Of course, the closing thought is that as we don't have to do so much with managing the things, we actually get to do the very, very exciting work of building our community. And for Vegas, we're really thrilled that we were able to use these private sector tools, quickly assess our community, and then use the other kinds of community engagement strategies so that we know who we're serving and better able to use and get, as Mara said, the biggest bang of the buck from the resources that we still have after the recession. Thank you.
Great. Super. Thanks, Danielle. And so Danielle's given us a broad view, and we're going to go then back into a narrower view, and Jacquie will be talking about then working with a specific group of individuals in a community.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, IMLS, for inviting me to be here today. I am delighted to be representing Infopeople and talking to you about a California State Library statewide initiative, the Veterans Connect at the Library, now going into its 4th year with IMLS funding and a significant amount of local resources as well. So it is absolutely appropriate that California be taking the lead in this. The military continues its drawdown in spite of what's going on in the news today. Military troops are being sent home from Southwest Asia, and the military force is being drawn down and reduced overall. Approximately 160,000 military service members are discharged every year, and over 10% of those veterans come to California. They're either discharged at a base in California, or they return to their home state, or they relocate here. So it is, again, it's perfectly appropriate, and it was spot on for California to recognize that veterans in their communities are in need of connecting, and what better place than a trusted and confidential with professional staff and help than at a public library. So sadly, a very high percentage of veterans across the country are not connecting, not tapping in, and not receiving benefits and services for which they may be eligible. A lot of that we've been told that every veteran or every discharged service member goes through a week of debriefing. It's called Transition Assistance Program, TAP, and it's a 1 week of very, very condensed, very structured information dumping. One veteran told me it's about 100 pounds of information received in maybe they get the week, and maybe they're out of town that week or they're on duty somewhere, and so they don't get the full week. Nevertheless, they come out of this with all this information that could they retain after one session, and so many are anxious about returning, and they're nervous and they're excited. So really coming out of it, someone else told me all they can think about is the next In-N-Out burger they're going to get. So we're really dealing with these folks. Some are young and some are not so young, but they've had a lot of information given to them, and they couldn't possibly remember everything. What they do remember, the younger veterans are connected to the higher education. They know they went in for those benefits and they come out knowing. So that's often the really strong link, is that they go to their community college or they get enrolled with their GI Bill and they know those benefits. But so many come out and they are totally off the grid in terms of what they're getting. And this goes back, we've talked with Vietnam veterans who had very, very little assistance, you'd think that there would have been progress, but even today, veterans are coming out not knowing their benefits and services. So without getting those services, they're leaving a lot of federal money on the table, and then they turn to the state. So it's a drain on the state services. So it's really to our advantage to get these folks connected to what services and benefits they can that they're eligible for. And it's really our responsibility. They have served us, and for what we can provide to them, it's really on us, and it makes you very proud to be part of their life. And just to kind of give you an idea of what the diversity is, I attended a VA Women Veterans event in Chico, California this past weekend. Chico is a branch library of Butte County, which is a rural Northern California community. The VA has a healthcare system that are targeting women veterans in these rural communities and really trying to bring down barriers of service to these women veterans. So it was an opportunity, and the library was offered to host the event. And so it brought these women, about 50 women had signed up through their VA connection to come to the Chico Library and spend a day of rejuvenation and rest. And they had healing touch and massage and makeup and manicures. It was a wonderful day, and the library just opened up their doors. And while the public was circulating still, these women were going to different offices that were little nooks and crannies set up so that they could go and have this day of refreshment. But just to give you an idea, that we had a luncheon at the end of the day, and they asked who's the oldest in the room, and there were two 91 and 90-year-olds from World War II, really, really special women. And boy, were they in great shape, a real inspiration. As well as a young 28-year-old recently discharged. So talking about diversity of a population, this is just one room. So you know that over the span of the country, we're really dealing with folks that are looking for burial rights for their spouses and hearing aid help, and then to the extreme of trying to connect to those education waivers and what's in their GI Bill. And drilling down to what's my DD 214, which is the piece of identification when you get discharged from the military. You have to have that. And if you've left the military and you don't remember what it was, or you've lost that piece of information, a lot of libraries are helping veterans find that identification so that they can connect with VA or whatever it is, the benefits they're looking for. So just to give you some background, how it started in California was the California Department of Veterans Affairs, CalVet, approached the state library and asked, how can libraries in the communities, because they're in every community and they're so available and they're trusted and they have great staff, how can libraries help in getting veterans connected to these benefits? When a military member is discharged, the Department of Defense immediately shuts down the email for that person. And there is no communication between Department of Defense and the various state departments of Veterans Affairs in how to try to connect with those people. So it's really on the veteran to make the connection. And unless they go out with a medical discharge, or that, like I said, they go directly to their community college or their university, there's a gap of communication. And so we don't have the ability to connect with them. So it's up to the State Department of Veterans Affairs, in our case, CalVet, that really have to do some outreach. And they depend on those county Veterans Service officers. They depend on different nonprofit and not-for-profit veteran organizations. And sadly, the younger vets that are coming out, we have found out as well, don't affiliate with those old guard organizations like the VFW and the other organizations that have been around a long time. They're not so gender friendly sometimes, and age is a difference, so they just don't see themselves as a veteran of that group. So again, if they're not connected through their school or some other affiliation, they really do miss out on a lot of these benefits. So through CalVet being our guide and our partner in this whole development of how can libraries, what can we do in communities, they suggested to us if we could create some kind of even a person on the staff or a volunteer that could just listen. Could we get good listeners? So the state librarian at the time, Stacy Aldrich, we kind of brainstormed, we could create an in-a-box model. What could we do that would be no burden on the library, or as least of a burden as possible, and create resources, a collection of materials that would be specific to to veteran issues and the current. We could build a volunteer corps that would be the point people for the veteran to come into and provide. And CalVet said if we could get a laptop, a printer, those would be huge, because a lot of the Department of Defense and veteran organizations still depend on printing and faxing. It's very dated, but even in the 4 years we've been involved, they're moving forward, so we're seeing progress. But and a point person in the library, a staff person that could be the contact for. I am one of 2 project managers on this project because it is statewide and it is growing. We do field a lot of questions and we provide the support, but it's really it's on that point person at the library to be the outreach and the contact for us. And another really key thing is to get involved in what the organizations are already, who's already serving veterans in your community. And that's why we have found at the project level, at the statewide level, it's really about the community needs assessment, drilled down to who's in that community and what's already going on. We never intended, and we made that very clear to all of the partners that we've made, we're not here to duplicate any services. We are strictly about referring and getting that veteran, maybe just being a good listener. And our volunteers are often veterans themselves or their military families. That's who we're targeting as our volunteers. And so that they really have a sense of what that veteran may have been, what their life might have been like. Because as much as I want to be a part of that community, I am not and I never will be. And I really feel that when I'm in a group of especially young veterans. They just have a real camaraderie, and I so respect that. But we've learned, so getting the volunteer to be a veteran or a military family member has been really pivotal. But knowing the community you're in, and in every community we're in currently, it's all very different. Some are really connected to the Employment Development Department. They've been a really good resource for us. Others have been to their county veteran service officers or other organizations within the community. So we have found that to be really key in making this successful in each community we're in. And I'd like to say that we're 24 now, but after July 1st, we think we'll be at 40 different sites. One of our branches in Sacramento Public Library, one of the branch has opened up her branch one morning every month ahead of the public library schedule and offers them, the veterans that happen to live in a residential facility down the street. They come, and it's a very special field trip for these vets because it's actually now, there's a certain amount of time where they're house restricted, but at a certain level, they can go to the library. That's their field trip perks. So Kristin, the branch manager, has opened up the library on these Friday mornings just to these veterans where they can come in. They get computer access. They can get staff assistance with creating resumes or working on their any other research they're doing, or they could just sit and read the newspaper in the big living room of this library. And they have told us through these focus groups we held that how special that makes them feel. And these are guys that are not prone to being touchy-feely ones. This makes them really feel very respected and honored. So that's been a great learning piece. But so we have a 12-step model that we've created that we're trying to kind of package and really refine so we can make this as simple as possible for libraries to take on. Again, building that collection, getting the laptop and the Chromebooks. That was another CalVet suggested if we could have something that people could kind of work on their own if they felt that they just wanted to do some research. So we check out Chromebooks inside the library for the veterans and or their family members. And we really do try to make that clear that family members are often the connection that we have, or initially a veteran through this project, we have found veterans often don't self-identify as veterans. So one of the basic questions we have learned and we've shared with our library's partners is not to ask the question, are you a veteran, but have you served in the military? And interestingly enough, women in particular are most likely not to identify themselves as a veteran. I met a woman who had had a long-time friendship with another woman, and neither of them had ever mentioned together that they had served in the military after knowing each other for years. And so it's a mindset, and I think we're learning that it's a different look. It's not our parents or our grandparents. It could be someone very young and very unassuming. But some of these vets don't self-identify, but they do so consciously, and they don't want to be a part of that organization. But it is through a family member or a friend that is often the person that will make that connection for us. So I think that sums up our Veterans Connect project. That it's growing, and we're very proud to be part of this community. And we have, in fact, in this library, I was talking to some volunteers when a gentleman was going up the escalator, showing her the key to his new apartment that he had achieved because of that connection with the woman that was sitting on the floor helping him. So we see it working. Thank you.
Great. All right, so we're going to stop talking for a while and ask you to think about questions that you might have of us, and happy to answer. And we've got questions that can come in live stream as well. And I wondered, is there anyone who has a question straight away? Yep.
I have a question for Danielle about accessing that tapestry resource. Is that something that you got grant funding for, or did you get it in kind?
Yeah. We actually received our first LSTA grant. It was 2009 money. We got it in 2010 and started to set up the system, which is this dynamic system. And we worked with the vendor Civic Technologies. And since that time, they have gone out to many other different public libraries. And so over the last 5 years, we've continued to get a bit of grant money here and there to sort of refine that. And now that we're working on the Power Patron project, we identified 10 libraries, small, medium, and large, and together I think we have over 18 million checkouts, and all of the data that we're looking at, not only in terms of each of our systems, but across the country, so that we can actually start to see which library systems might have similar kinds of community populations, and we can create some learning communities around sharing information on what works there.
The question here.
Good morning. My name is Luis Correal, and I'm with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's a new federal agency, and I've worked with some of you here, and we're very excited because we're also doing a lot of work with libraries. I actually have a question, but before I do, can you repeat the name of the database?
We are using, and we started out with Esri's Tapestry. And then Civic Technologies has now added a second market segmentation database called Landscape.
Thanks. My question is, what kind of worker assessment work have you done in terms of serving the walk-ins versus people who access your services online? And I hope I'm making sense of my question.
Is that for Kristin on the financial project?
Any of you, sort of like we feel that we have patrons that just come to the library and get books, but there are also a lot who are accessing your services online. So have you done work in that space?
I would say that that's our biggest challenge in the industry, is that the online services, it's very, well, unless they're doing a database, we are lacking data in terms of who is walking in and coming into the programs. So we have great and vibrant partnerships. We have found, like Kristin found, that some of the more helpful programs that we really spend a lot of time developing, we're not getting the kind of program participation that we want. So over time, I would say that would be our biggest challenge, is to try to somehow either get a barcode scan or find out that they don't have a card. In Las Vegas, we're really working on cards that are database only, so that they never have to show up, to the library to get an activated card. They can work from home or their office.
We certainly try to service people who come in through our ask. We have a very, very vibrant, very, very busy, always under-resourced virtual telephone and email reference service called Ask NYPL. And we make sure that staff from that service are part of the librarians who are continuously trained with the online training modules we have. So one of the ways we help people who choose not to come in or who are outside the city is through Ask NYPL. We also have advisory services in the entrepreneurship area and in the job coaching area. We have 20, again, volunteer career coaches, all of whom are certified, and some of them work on the outside and outplacement, and they give about 4 hours a week on site, but more of them now are starting to offer Skype coaching. So we have started in the advisory services working. We have one job outplacement coach who Skypes in from Singapore, for example. And I don't think I underscored the fact that of the 11 modules where we did an intensive 3 to 4 hour hands-on training of our frontline staff, 8 of those are also available online, so that with both our volunteer financial coaches as well as our library staff and people who come through Ask, we are able to refer them not only to the vetted web resources, but to the whole process of going through a module on insurance or identity theft or living on the financial ed. So we have several levels that we can use virtually.
Maria. Just wait. And actually, Maria, will you identify your name?
Maria Carpenter from Santa Monica. Kristin, your program sounds amazing. And I was wondering, who designed the curriculum?
I should have mentioned that. I tend to go off on segues, and I was so determined not to go over that I left out some crucial things. A fabulous, fabulous team from Rutgers University, from the Cooperative Extension program at Rutgers. She is considered, Barb O'Neill is considered one of the deans of consumer personal finance education, and the reason they were such dreams. Anyone who's really interested, I should say that I didn't look as closely as I should have. I'm happy to answer any other questions, but my email or my web address there should be for this project should be nypl.org/Sybil, not underscore. And one of the byproducts of this project, and why I underscored the point that regardless of how well-resourced you are, where we are, I don't think libraries, I think IMLS helps us, I think Urban Library helps us, ALA helps us, but I don't think we truly appreciate. We think of ourselves as serving the end user, our patrons, in these 64 different kinds of households. We are a huge partner, and we truly serve NGOs and the tri-li government agencies. And in the case of Barbara O'Neill, she is tapped, I would say, by 6 or 7 different consumer academic organizations or whatever. But having worked with us now, we taught her how to create avatars, for example. We were able to give her team, which had this incredible knowledge, and created these scripts and these interactive exercises and the vetted websites. But we gave her 21st century technology tools, and as a result, she goes all over the country now talking about libraries and the role they play. So we've become not only a consumer of her untouchable personal finance information, but she's become a champion for us because we have done what we do well, which is teach, and she goes on military bases and does the financial planning there.
Hi, Susan McVeigh at the Oklahoma Department of Libraries. All of you use volunteers in the programs and outreach that you do. I'd be interested in your comments about how you go about recruiting them or what you found. I think Jacquie touched on it briefly in terms of working or selecting military family members or veterans themselves to use, but any tips or observations you found about how you went through that and how it all worked out?
I'll start. Thank you. Yes, that was our goal, and the goal of using volunteers was because they are already so connected in their communities, but also to take the burden off library staff. It would be one person managing the volunteers. What we have found, however, and it's a challenge, is that volunteers come in and they're very excited and very passionate and ready to serve and ready to help, but there is not this steady flow of veterans coming in the door. So we asked that we're doing actually a series of webinars now to train volunteers, and these are highly skilled, ready to go volunteers. Like I said, often veterans themselves. So we're trying to give them new sets of skills, like how to help a veteran transfer their military skills into civilian language. So on an employment resume, they can speak civilian and really showcase what they do. So we're trying to give our volunteers more sets of ideas to incorporate while they're on the job. But what we have, sadly, volunteers are leaving because they're not getting those hours of service that they had hoped or the interaction. We've tapped into to make up for that or to kind of supplement. The VA offers a work-study program with students from using their GI Bill that they can be placed in community resources. So we've got 4 sites now that are approved by the VA as being work-study sites, and one has already placed their students. So these are great. These are veterans sitting in your library bringing really great sets of skills, and they're being paid by the VA. So it's a win-win. So we're hoping to build on that. But the volunteer piece can be a challenge, but again, they are ombudsmen, the liaisons to those communities that are so important. That's been our experience. Thanks.
We have a multi-pronged approach. There is, because NYPL is so huge, there's a fabulous volunteer office run centrally. But we get most of our volunteers by strategic partnering with professional and trade associations that have a mandate, as do these federal offices have a mandate to do consumer education, and they're evaluated on it, and we provide a place for them to get the foot traffic. The same is true for these professional associations that have a pro bono mandate, and some certified financial planners or CFA, chartered financial analysts, or CPAs, New York State Society of Certified Public Accountants. They actually have as part of their certification in some cases. So again, they're providing a service, we are providing them a service. And I can't underscore that enough. In the financial education arena, which does involve financial products, et cetera, one must have a QC, a quality assurance element. And the way we have found works wonderfully. I mentioned that throughout the system we do, I should only talk about Sybil. If you take all of our advisory services with the entrepreneurs, the financial advisors, the credit crisis coaches, the tax advisors, the Medicare advisors, the older American, these are all separate programs, the entry-level job search, the executive job search, the technology training job search. If you take all those together, we have about 4,500 of these one-on-one 30 to 60-minute sessions. We do it using an online platform that you can subscribe to called GenBook, where people can sign up. And there is an anonymous at the end. It also reminds them, because we have the same problem of eager volunteers who become less eager when they give up their Saturday for 4 hours, and 2 out of the 4 people don't show up because it's a free service. So there is the ability to comment, and it is amazing how I read you from people whose language is not, first language is not English. People are very frank, and in the 5 years we've been doing the financial planning, there have been only 3 instances, but in it they've said I was a little uncomfortable because I felt like I was being pushed a particular product. As soon as that comes up, we are able to go to the professional associations with whom we work. We know who the person is because and they deal with it. It's not a guillotine or anything, but they are told if it happens again. So there is that is another issue with volunteers, is you just like we sit in on our own library colleagues' classes, et cetera. There is always that issue. And because we're a business library, the other thing we do that I think other libraries are a little hesitant to do, we are a business library. Our mission was to help level the playing field in New York City so that small businesses would have a lot of the resources that the larger corporations have. So we spend almost $1 million worth of premium databases that we provide absolutely free, hands-on training, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we also provide a venue for small businesses that are getting started to give public programs. Someone who's going out on his own has become a financial advisor. So and this makes a lot of libraries uncomfortable. If I offer these programs and we put them out in a newsletter that goes out to, I think it's 26,000 subscribers, am I endorsing this small business as the best website developer or self-promotion newsletter organizer? And what we do is we say that your programs, your presentations must be totally generic and educational. Your deck doesn't have your corporate information. But people develop relationships afterwards. And, of course, you can hand out cards, et cetera. You didn't ask this, but I had to say this because we are working now with a roster of over 300 volunteers, some in the corporate sector. And one of the things we have to do is acknowledge that through this they do get some visibility and they may pick up customers. We're a small business library. We don't argue with that. We are just not in a position to endorse them.
While the microphone is going that direction, actually, I wanted to throw out a question to my colleagues. You all have created a tremendous body of knowledge about your communities that you're serving. So you have information, you have insights, you have market intelligence that probably many of your colleagues in the local government, sister agencies may not have, but would find really valuable. And how are you sharing that, or are you sharing that and communicating what you've got?
Well, I think I started to say with the slide that we're actually using it to reposition ourselves. We are now invited to tables that we were completely left out of. And it's across all sectors. It's education, economic development, small business development, folks who we have a lot of folks who are moving in who have tremendous amount of information and career backgrounds, and they will find us because they see us now as a very data-driven and customer service-driven organization. So I think that it's been just a tremendous resource to the library and repositioned us very quickly as sort of a go-to organization for community information.
I'm Andrew Pace from SELC. I had a question for Danielle. You mentioned I was very curious about your Power Patron assessment, and you mentioned that you were using primarily circulation data. What are the data you wish you had?
Well, of course, we wish we had all of that Overdrive, Xenia, Freegal, all of the downloadables. We have, on occasion, just done snapshots with computer use. There again, our culture of privacy is really killing us. We are in as I mentioned, working with people who every day live on social media. So we really need to get over that hurdle as an organization and somehow or other capture the data. When we were doing, we did a 3-month snapshot on the computer use just to see if we were reaching the right populations, but that's a one-time shot. We did similar work with our summer reading program for 2 years. We were using the advanced registration and then their also not only capturing their library card but also their student ID number. And then we were able to go to the school district and say, we would like to see, is our data replicating that national data around preventing the summer slide. So, there's, I would say that really those are the two biggies, the program attendance and the downloadables that would be the most helpful to us in terms of the future and getting a real sense and being able to make that compelling case of who are we serving, who's in the building, and what are they doing. And online.
I just wanted to add, I hope I've interested some of you in looking up mypl.org, Money Matters, and taking and doing, customizing it and improving it, doing anything you want with the fabulous curriculum developed by Rutgers. But I would also like to say that every community should have a think tank. We're just blessed. When you have nothing else to do, Google Center for the Urban Future. Its acronym is CUF. And libraries. Not incentivized by us in any way, they have put their fabulous researchers, they have used a team of 6 or 7 full-time, they may not be full-time, but their own employees, and then they bring in contract employees. They have done, that I'm aware of, in the last 4 years, they have done maybe 5 reports on New York City's libraries and the role they play in acclimating immigrants, fostering small business. They did another one on the crumbling infrastructure, et cetera. So the question was about sharing the data, and they ask us for the names of people, the names of organizations, the names of associations, residents, community-based organizations that are willing to talk about their use of a library, and then they put together these readable, very well-respected reports that when they're issued, get a notice in the Times, for example, and get covered. That is a wonderful use of our data and our constituency's experience that ratchets up the whole role of the library in our community, which is New York City.
What was the name again?
Center for the Urban Future, CUF, New York City.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I want to have you join me in giving a hand to our wonderful presenters.